9 years ago, my wife, Megan, and I spent our honeymoon touring the east coast of the United States. At first, I wasn't thrilled with the idea. Megan had wanted something tropical, St. Lucia, maybe, but I managed to talk her into exploring America instead. The decision turned out to be perfect. We flew out of Heathrow on an early morning flight and touched down at Boston Logan Airport hours later. The trip got off to a rocky start when our attempt to join the Mile High Club failed miserably, but it didn't matter. We more than made up for it over the next few weeks, exploring the charming small towns of New England and hitting every roadside motel we could find. Coming from Liverpool, I had no idea places like Dartmouth or Brown existed, and New Hampshire, well, I'd expected highways and suburbs. Instead, we found rolling green hills and quiet villages that looked like something out of a postcard. By the time we returned home, we'd vowed to revisit. But, as always, life got in the way. Fast forward nearly a decade, and Megan and I had settled into a comfortable life. I was 33, recently promoted to junior director at Hastings Environmental, a rising star in high-tech waste management. My boss, Gary, practically ran the place, and I was about fourth in line behind him. Megan, on the other hand, worked as a high school teacher. She loved it but sometimes felt stuck, frustrated that her career progression depended as much on seniority as it did on skill. I could tell it bothered her that I had advanced so much faster in my field. Despite that, we were happy, or so I thought. We had no kids, a nice house, albeit heavily mortgaged, and plenty of plans for the future. Sure, the fire wasn't quite what it had been in the early days of our marriage, but that seemed normal. Megan was still as beautiful as ever, and our intimate life, though sporadic, had its moments of brilliance. The story begins on the eve of our vacation to Italy. Megan had just finished the school term, and we were overdue for a break. That day, she dragged me out shopping for holiday clothes, insisting that we needed to update our wardrobe. Predictably, I walked away with a single pair of shorts while Megan bagged 5 outfits, each skimpier than the last. It was the last item she chose that gave me pause. She held up a black blouse, if you could even call it that. The fabric was thin, almost see-through, and left little to the imagination. "What do you think?" she asked. I frowned. "It's a bit sheer." Her lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Exactly what I'm looking for. I'd better try it on." She disappeared into the changing room while I waited with a handful of other men. All of us resigned to the endless shopping ritual. I half expected Megan to poke her head around the corner and call me over, like most women would. But no, she came strutting out into the waiting area, bold as anything, wearing the blouse. And she wasn't wearing a bra. The black material clung to her, offering a clear outline of every curve. It wasn't just revealing. It was provocative, leaving nothing to the imagination. My first reaction was shock, and judging by the looks on the other guys' faces, they felt the same. Megan twirled confidently, ignoring the stares, and turned to me with an arched brow. "Well," she prompted. I cleared my throat. "It's, something." She laughed. "Perfect. I'll take it." From there, we headed to the swimwear section, where Megan picked out what was barely a bikini. She disappeared into the fitting room again and took her sweet time. When she finally pulled the curtain back, my jaw nearly hit the floor. "Where's the rest of it?" I asked, staring at the flimsy strings and minimal fabric that barely qualified as clothing. Megan grinned. "It's for Italy. Why would I need a top there?" She wasn't wrong. On our last trip to Italy, Megan had gone topless at the beach after only an hour of hesitation. But this was a department store in Liverpool, not a sunny Mediterranean coastline. Still, she stood there proudly, completely unbothered by the fact that a couple of other guys nearby were sneaking glances. "Do you like it?" she asked, arching her back to emphasize the bikini's lack of coverage. Before I could answer, one of the onlookers piped up. "I'd give her one." The others laughed, and Megan giggled along with them. I wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or furious. "Fine," I said, cutting the moment short. "You can have it." On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that Megan's behavior was a little off. She wasn't usually this brazen, at least not in public, but it wasn't the first time she'd acted out like this. Megan had always been headstrong, and when she felt slighted, she had a way of making sure I knew it. There was the time she'd flirted with one of her colleagues right in front of me at a work event, even kissing the guy on the dance floor. When I confronted her later, furious, she dismissed it as my fault, claiming I'd forgotten the anniversary of our first date. Then there was the time I got stuck in traffic and arrived late for a dinner reservation. Megan left without me and spent the night at a club, surrounded by younger men who were clearly interested in more than just conversation. I had to physically pull her away from them, enduring their glares as I led her out. And now this, the blouse, the bikini, the boldness. Something was brewing, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was another one of Megan's games. I can't remember the last time I'd been in a fight. Probably not since high school. But that night, with a pack of rowdy young men surrounding Megan and me, I felt my pulse pounding. I'm not the kind of guy who looks for trouble, but backing down isn't in my nature either. When one of them shoved me, I shoved back, and before I knew it, things were spiraling out of control. Megan, in her usual carefree way, stepped between us, scolding the group like a teacher reprimanding her students. "Come on, you guys," she said, her tone breezy but firm. "Leave him alone, will you?" It worked to a degree. Their shouts quieted somewhat, but the tension still hung thick in the air. Then, as if to pour gasoline on an already burning fire, Megan added, "Tell you what, boys, I'll give you all a nice kiss goodnight, and then my husband and I will be on our way." My stomach churned with anger and disbelief. "You kiss one of them, Megan," I snapped, my voice loud enough to cut through the bar's din. "And you don't bloody bother coming home tonight?" Her eyes flicked to mine, startled but defiant. Around us, people began to edge away, sensing trouble brewing. Even the bartender stopped what he was doing to clear the glasses from our table. Most of the group seemed ready to back down, but two of the more aggressive ones weren't finished yet. I braced myself, my fists clenched tightly, my jaw set. It was going to happen, and I wasn't about to back away. But just as the first guy stepped forward, two towering bouncers appeared out of nowhere. They muscled their way between us, their sheer size enough to defuse the situation. "You lot stay here," one of them growled at the group, pushing them back. Then he turned to me. "I suggest you get out of here, mate, while you're still in one piece, and take that troublemaker with you." I wasn't about to argue. As much as my pride burned, I knew he was right. Megan might have been enjoying the drama, but I wasn't in the mood to get my face rearranged. Without a word, I grabbed her arm and dragged her outside. The drive home was silent, the tension in the car thick enough to choke on. But once we got through the door, the shouting started. We had one of the worst rows we'd ever had, each of us throwing angry words like daggers, and it didn't let up for days. When the dust finally settled, I warned her, very clearly, that if she ever pulled a stunt like that again, the consequences would be severe. Still, Megan being Megan, I wasn't entirely surprised by her antics the following day in the changing rooms. When I confronted her about it, she brushed it off with a laugh. "Just a warning shot," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You know I'm not happy that you're working tomorrow morning when we're supposed to be leaving. So, it was just a little reminder." I stared at her, incredulous. A little reminder? In her mind, there seemed to be no difference between flashing her chest at strangers and the outright flirting she'd done before. But for me, the line was clear, and she was crossing it. The next morning, I had an important meeting scheduled with Rob, a Canadian exec who was over to evaluate our products. Jack, my boss, had met with him a couple of weeks ago, and now it was my job to show him around and give him a deeper understanding of our operations. It was an opportunity that could open doors for our company, and for me. Megan, of course, wasn't happy about it. "Cancel it," she demanded when I told her my plans. "Get someone else to cover for you." "I can't, Megan," I explained, trying to keep my patience. This could be huge for us. A foothold in the North American market could mean big things for the company and for my career. She wasn't impressed. "You think more about your bloody job than you do about me," she yelled, storming off. I didn't bother arguing further. By now, I knew her moods well enough to know she'd cool off eventually. I patted her on the bottom as I left, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and told her to be ready and packed when I got back. "You be 1 minute late," she spat, "and you'll regret it." The meeting with Rob went exceptionally well. So well, In fact, that I was sure we were close to sealing a major deal. Over lunch, he hit me with a barrage of questions, each more insightful than the last. I could tell he was testing me, and I was holding my own. But as the clock ticked on, I realized I was cutting it close. Mind if I call my wife real quick? I said, excusing myself to the restroom. Megan answered almost immediately. You what? She shouted when I told her I might be a few minutes late. She didn't let me finish explaining. I warned you, David. If you're late, you'll regret it. I'm not missing this holiday, not even for you. I tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. By the time she hung up on me, I was just as furious as she was. Back at the table, Rob seemed to sense my distraction. David, he said, leaning forward, it's time I came clean with you. I braced myself, expecting bad news. Instead, he smiled. I want you to come work for me. In Canada. For a moment, I was stunned into silence. Say that again? Rob chuckled and repeated himself. We're planning to license your tech for the North American market, and we need someone like you to help us set it up. Jack suggested you're the best man for the job. By the time I left, my head was spinning. Moving to Canada? A new life? A new job? It was an incredible opportunity, and I knew Megan would be thrilled. But when I called to tell her, the response wasn't what I'd expected. Where the hell are you? She snapped. I'm on my way home, I said, still riding the high of Rob's offer. Wait until you hear. Forget it, she interrupted coldly. I'm already on my way to the airport with Darren. Darren. Of all people, Darren Phillips, the art teacher who had already caused tension between us. It wasn't until I reached the airport that I realized just how far things had gone. At the check-in desk, the attendant confirmed my worst fears. Megan and Darren were flying together. To Italy, I was too late. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. I woke up groggily on the sofa, the phone still clutched in my hand. I wasn't sure why I was holding it so tightly. It wasn't like it would change anything. The screen lit up, vibrating in my hand. Hello? I mumbled, still half asleep. Is that you, David? Megan's voice rang through the receiver, sharp and authoritative, just like the schoolteacher she was. Yes, I said, my voice flat. Well? She demanded. Well, what? I replied, dreading where this conversation was going. No apologies, you bastard, she spat, her tone dripping with venom. Don't you care that you've let me down again? I clenched my teeth, holding back the rising frustration. Let you down? I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. And what about when you didn't show up for dinner with the neighbors because of some silly problem at school? It was a pointless argument to make, but I couldn't help myself. That's different, David, and you know it, she shouted, dismissing my words entirely. From where I was standing, it didn't feel different at all. We were shouting back and forth, neither of us really listening. I knew we were getting nowhere, so I tried to steer the conversation in another direction. Megan, I said, softening my tone, there's something important I need to tell you about my job. She cut me off immediately. There you go again. Your job? That's all you ever think about. What about me, David? I'm here, all alone, in Italy. Her words hit me like a cold wave, and everything from the past few days came rushing back. My frustration boiled over. Alone, Megan? I asked sharply. What about Darren? The line went quiet, and I could almost hear her brain scrambling to come up with a response. What about him? She asked, her voice lower now, more guarded. Are you still in bed with him? I pressed, the spite in my voice clear. There was a pause, then she responded with venom of her own. What if I am? You deserve it, you bastard. It's all your fault. Did he perform well? I asked, my tone biting. Better than you, David, she replied nastily. So, eat your heart out, Mr. Nobody. The line went dead, and with it, any lingering hope I had for my marriage. If there was anything left between us, her words had just shattered it. The next morning, I dragged myself into Jack's office. He looked surprised to see me. I thought you'd be in Italy, he said, leaning back in his chair. I avoided the details, waving off his curiosity. Instead, I confronted him about Rob's offer. Why didn't you mention it before? Jack sighed. I couldn't, David. Not before Rob met you properly and made the decision himself. I let out a bitter laugh. Well, thanks a lot, Jack. That's done wonders for my marriage. I told him the whole story. To my surprise, he didn't look particularly shocked. The husband is always the last to know, David, Jack said quietly. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded, leaning forward. He shrugged, but the way he avoided my gaze spoke volumes. At a couple of company events, well, let's just say Megan's been putting herself around. I stared at him, my stomach sinking. What the hell are you talking about? He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press further. I didn't need to. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Between my marital problems and the speed of the arrangements for my transfer to Canada, I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. Megan called me again, as I knew she would. Hi, lover, she greeted me, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Thought I'd let you know how wonderful it is here. I didn't bother responding to her tone. Megan, I said firmly, I have something important to tell you. But she cut me off again. Never mind that, lover. Are you ready to apologize for your attitude yet? I sighed, realizing it was pointless. Megan, I tried again. I really need to. Not now, sweetie, she interrupted, her voice light and dismissive. I still love you, you know. But until you're ready to say sorry, I've got someone else to keep happy. I hung up without another word. The final straw came a few days later. Megan called me in the early hours of the morning, her voice slurred. David, she mumbled, how did you know Darren was here with me? I let out a bitter laugh. I saw you with him, Megan, getting on the plane. That's how I knew. You were there, she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. You were really there? Of course I was there. I snapped. How the bloody hell do you think I knew that creep was with you? Why didn't you stop us? Stop you? I barked. I got there on time, but you'd already gone through security with your bloody boyfriend. There was silence on the other end before she finally spoke. David, I thought you weren't coming. Darren gave me a lift, and in a fit of temper, I asked him to come with me. And he just happened to have his luggage and passport with him, did he? I bit out sarcastically. David, I didn't wait to hear the rest. I hung up, and I didn't take any more of her calls after that. When Megan finally returned to home, she called again. David, she said, her voice quieter this time. I'm coming home early. Can you pick me up from Heathrow? I thought about saying no, but something inside me compelled me to agree. When she came through arrivals, she looked as radiant as ever. Her blonde hair catching the light, her skin tanned. She ran to me, dropped her case, and threw her arms around me. David, sweetie, I've missed you so much. I stepped back, pulling away gently. Let's grab a coffee, I said calmly, before we head home. At the cafe, Megan tried to brush past everything that had happened. I was wrong, she said softly. I shouldn't have done it. Darren wasn't what you thought, was he? I asked pointedly. Tears welled in her eyes. No, he wasn't, she admitted. He cheated on me. Can you believe that, David? I looked at her evenly. Yes, Megan, I can. When she suggested we go home and make up, I finally told her the truth. I'm leaving, Megan, I said quietly. The house is yours. The car, too. But I'm leaving for Canada. Alone. Her face crumpled as the weight of my words sank in. 9 years later, as I stood at Heathrow waiting for my new family, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. My wife, Maureen, emerged from the crowd, her beauty radiant as ever. Our 2 children ran ahead of her, their laughter filling the air. I made the right decision. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to find happiness. What do you think? Did I make the right choice by leaving behind a life of betrayal, or could things have ended differently? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.